everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and
Hello.
together we are ThinkerThemer, and today we're excited to tell you about a game that has quickly become one of our most played games of 2023. It is the Battle of Versailles by designers Pujadas and Renalias and Salt and Pepper Games.
Now, this has got to be one of the single best board game settings that I have seen in a long, long time, if not potentially ever. This sounds like a lot, but get this. So the Battle of Versailles is based on a real historical event that changed the world of fashion in 1973, where you essentially had the Palace of Versailles, which was in a very dire need of restoration, and they were kind of desperate for funds. And publicist Eleanor Lambert came up with this idea of what if we had a fashion show where it's kind of like a competition between the very, very well-established French fashion designers and all the, the sort of less established, but like the up-and-coming American, particularly kind of like New York designers. Now, in this event, America was very much had the odds stacked against them, because the French designers, they were extremely well established, had all the prestige in the world, and they also had all of the advantages essentially of being in home turf and having even just the length of the show that they did, the amount of time that they got for the rehearsals and all of that, and the drama that happened behind the scenes. All of it is just so fascinating, and yet the Americans managed to kind of come in with this incredibly short show. First time African-American models had walked the French fashion runway, and just completely sort of blew it out of the water, having this incredible reaction that just essentially put American fashion on the map. And it was sort of the start of a big, big revolution in terms of, the way the fashion world kind of worked and all of that stuff. There's a lot of incredible documentaries as well that cover this. But this game, I think, has done a great job of creating a player versus player, kind of like head-to-head version of that tension and that tug-of-war, mimicking and mirroring exactly a lot of those tensions. We learned so much from the rule book as well, in terms of all the historical context and background, and it's just what a delight.
Now, the way this event plays out on the table is that each player is going to take the role of either the US or France. So this is a two-player head-to-head battle, and you're going to be playing out of asymmetric decks. You're going to be playing cards from your hand, and the game is going to evolve such that the model is dictating what happens each turn, and every time the model reaches the end of the runway, that is the end of the round, and there will be at max 5 rounds in this game. Now, 5 out of the 9 tiles that make up the runway are actually play a card symbols. So when the model reaches one of these tiles, either just the French or the French and Americans are going to be able to play a card out of their hand. Now, why is there a difference in the number of turns? The French get to play up to 5 every round, and the US are only playing up to 3. That's to represent what happened in the event, where the French had a 2.5-hour show, and the Americans had a more punchy, avant-garde 30-minute show where they were able to showcase all of their designers. Now, what kind of cards are you playing out of your hand? Well, the first thing and the most important thing is the fashion. And so each side has different dresses that you're going to be able to play out in front of the runway. And they're a little bit different though, because on the US side, the fashion is really their main arsenal. It's what they brought over to showcase, and because of that, they have a high amount of prestige associated with them. At the end of each round, you're going to compare the prestige on the US side to the French side, and depending on how that's counterbalanced, we're going to move the prestige track. So we want to have as much prestige as possible. And so the French can also play outfits, but their outfits, that wasn't what was special. They had all of the background, all the set going on, lots of money, but their outfits didn't have that much prestige. And so that's represented by lower amounts of prestige here, but they do get more turns, so they can play more dresses if they want to. They can also have the ability to mess with the US splaying of these cards, because once you start to move dresses and stack them, the prestige gets hidden. Whereas on the French side, when they're stacked, you lose these symbols, which I'll come back to in a moment, but the prestige stays available. So it's the action cards that you can play out of your hand that allow you to mess with the setup that's going on here and do wonderful things like upgrade the tiles in the runway. And so you can see on each side of the runway there are lights that are either turned on or turned off, and that's to represent that effect being in your favor when there's more light. So these tiles will flip and you'll get more benefits associated with that action when the model activates it. Finally, in your hand, you also have celebrities, because this event was attended by many famous people like Andy Warhol and the Princess of Monaco. And you can play these cards down from your side of the palace board to the other player's side. And actually, one of the end game conditions is if you can place 7 celebrities down, you instantly win the game. So this is a tug of war that as we start moving in together, you end up then replacing your opponent's celebrities with celebrities of your own. So that's the player card action, but when the model moves towards the end of the runway, some great things happen at the end of the round as well. The first thing is that we are going to compare income. So throughout the player card round, and once we reach here, we have the opportunity to play cards face down because every card has a monetary value. When we reveal those cards, when the model reaches this income tile, we're going to compare the total value of all of the cards that we've placed there, and the player who has banked the most is going to be able to restore the Palace of Versailles, because after all, we're trying to fundraise to bring the palace back to its former glory. And so the person who comes first is going to be able to draft 2 of these tiles. At the start of the game, there's only 2 that are revealed. As we move that away, there's going to be others that are revealed, the ones that are adjacent to the one that was previously taken. Now, each of these tiles has some kind of benefit on it, you know, flipping tiles, upgrading actions, that type of thing. But there's also a little French flag at the bottom. And this is important because one of the win conditions for the French team is to get 15 of these symbols on their side. So the French are very much encouraged to bank as much money as they can to help restore the Palace of Versailles to its former glory, but also to get these tokens and ultimately win the battle. Now, as long as your opponent has half the amount of money banked that you had, they also get to take a tile, but then the model is going to move along, and now we do the designer action. And this is really interesting because in every round of this game, maximum 5 rounds, there's going to be a designer who has different styles of dresses that are going to be able to give you benefits if you're able to showcase that on the runway. So you can see here, for example, Anne Klein wants 2 of this green symbol showing, but unfortunately, there's only 1 showing with the dresses. However, because this tile is upgraded, we have a wild here. So this player who's playing the US can use that pair to activate this strong action, which is to bring back a dress that's been discarded. So once we activate our bonuses there, we then move to the final prestige part of the round, where we total up the prestige points that are on our outfits, that are on our designers, noting that most of the French designers have a lot of prestige, and the new upcoming US designers have very little prestige, as well as the celebrities that we have on each of our sides of the celebrity track. And then the person who has the most, the overflow of those prestige points, are going to be shown on this prestige tracker that has the French and the US sides on here on the board. If at any time one of the players gets to the end of this track, they instantly win the game as well. And there's one other way that the US team can win this game, and that is if they are able to stack all 6 different design styles in one pile here with their dresses. So as you can see, there's many different ways to win this game, some that are the same, some that are different between the players. But if we go through all 5 rounds of the game and none of those are triggered, then it's the person who has the most prestige that wins. So in case it wasn't clear from my description of how the game plays, there are so many thematic elements in this game, and we always look for a game that integrates theme and mechanics, and this one does it so beautifully across so many different parts.
There's just so many, it's like there's so many versions of a tug of war, and you can't really take your eye off any of them. And so all this thing of the number of cards that you get, like when you start playing as France, you feel so powerful. You feel like, yeah, everything, like, of course we have all the prestige. Of course we're going to, be the best.
Our designers are the best. They're the most prestigious.
This is a well-known fact. So
in fact, France is also the tiebreaker. So anytime there's a tie, France will always break the tie because they had the advantage of, owning the fashion industry.
And so then when you start out as the US player, you're like, you're so, it just feels so almost unfair because you have so few turns. But then it's like, then it just means that every turn you kind of have to really make it count. Like there's no time to waste.
And your dresses are worth so much. And I love that thematically because that was all they had. They turned up with their dresses, their set, everything went wrong with their set. And so that's really what they had to showcase. I mean, that and Liza Minnelli.
I mean, Liza with a Z. The other thing that I loved about this is also all of the differences, a lot like the action cards that actually allow you to play different sort of full actions. They are all also based on events and things that happen behind the scenes or that were kind of so one of them is like there were termites, so that was one of the issues like on the stage, and so you're actually learning about this event as you're playing it, and it's just so great. And again, and the rule book itself has done a great job of giving you a really great context of this event, and then even explaining why these cards are there, like giving you a bit more background. And then it infuses into the game because as you're playing, you're like, oh yeah, you have that extra relationship with what that means.
And I often don't care too much about theme, as if you watch the channel, you would know. But I read this entire rule book, and I don't mean how it plays, but everything up front was written by a fashion writer,
journalist, fashion journalist,
and everything at the back was like about all of the characters that are shown and what their contribution was to the event. And once you've read that, and once you've read why the event cards are what they are, then when you're playing, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, because this happened. And Liza Minnelli shows up, and she's got one of the most powerful cards because she did the this Broadway style number. She was the opening show for every one of for every one of the designers. She did like a mini show in between, and we just learned so much about this fantastic event that really changed the face of fashion.
But also the detail of even with the production, the consideration into the dresses that are featured are all based on dresses that were actually part of that runway show, and the illustrations were done by a fashion illustrator. So it's like all the research was actually done with like fashion journalists, and so it's like this is one of those themes that you wouldn't have thought that there would be so much thought put into it, and all of that really, really paid off.
And actually, we got to meet the designers of this game who were very proud to teach us this game, and we played it at Essen. But what was fascinating is that we were like, why did you design this like war style battle game, but with this fashion theme? And actually, it was the publisher who was very proud of this theme and was just like, I just wanted to find some designers who would be happy to make this game a reality. And you can just tell between the three of them the amount of effort they put into to do this event justice, to research it well, and then to bring the experts into it, so the journalists, the illustrators, to really make every element of the theme shine. And so Maggie mentioned that this game is like a tug-of-war, and that's exactly the style of game it is. So if you don't like PvP, where it feels like a battle game, this might not be for you. But if you don't mind a little bit of like, ultimately it's like take that because you're playing turns to really try and disrupt what your opponent is doing, then this game gives you that feeling with a less aggressive vibe. So, we've played different games like Radlands and things like that we really enjoy. But all of those games are a little bit violent in their like the
themes. Setting and the themes are always violence, or combat,
And so to out-fashion someone is kind of a fun idea, but it really feels like you have the pressure of the country behind you, because when you're playing, you have to watch so many things. So in this game, there are so many different end-game conditions. So for example, if one player gets a run of 7 celebrities, the game instantly ends. And so you are watching that track and you're watching your opponent add celebrity after celebrity, and by the time it starts getting to the 5th and 6th, you're like, okay, I need to change my strategy and play some celebrities to take back some more of that track. Likewise, when you're playing dresses down as well, you're thinking about is this going to benefit me from a symbol perspective for the designers, given which designer that I have this round, or do I really need to focus on just putting down as many different dresses as I can, because I'm getting behind in the prestige track and I need to counterbalance that.
And potentially, so at any point, one of the things that you can do is all of your cards can either be discarded if you want to essentially like discard and draw another 2 cards, but then you're kind of wasting that action.
And the actions are so precious.
Even when you're friends and you have this excess of action, it's still every action counts.
You can win or lose this game based on a couple of bad choices.
Absolutely. And then that's one thing. It's giving you that option of adding more cards or going through that deck. The other one is you can actually use this for income. You can essentially, as I'm playing here, instead of discarding it or playing that dress, I'm gonna use it, bank it. So you can start banking, and this is both players can be banking multiple. So that becomes then a battle for, that area of all those tiles, which all of those can have really powerful actions as well in terms of affecting the state of the runway at a very critical point, because after you kind of modify those things, then is when you have the this element of going, okay, well now let's score, or let's look at those symbols, and then let's score for the prestige. So this can become incredibly key and pivotal, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, and these tiles, you've got to keep an eye on those as well, because if the French gets a run with these symbols, then and the US isn't doing their job to try and win through prestige or other ways, then ultimately the French might just win just by taking the right symbols here. But yeah, they are very powerful, and there's other powerful things that can happen based on the card play as well. One example is that some cards allow you to switch the placement of these runway tiles, and when the model is on that tile and they get switched, you completely miss the tile that was moved back.
The US would lose that turn.
Yes, so in this case, the US only has 3 turns per round, and the French have just made them lose a turn completely, because the model won't activate until she comes around again. Yeah. And so it feels mean, but that's because that is the aim of the game. Yeah. It is direct, head-to-head. And Maggie and I, for 2 people who don't love so much confrontation, we actually just really, really enjoy this level of interaction. And this game doesn't overstay its welcome. It's about a 30-minute game, and what we found was as soon as we finished playing, we wanted to play again. It's just one of those games where it's like, oh, you got me in that last card, or it was so close that you won by 2 prestige. Yeah. Let's play again, and let's swap roles. And the 2 roles feel really different because they are linked to what happened at the event. You feel like the underdog is the US, and you feel with the French of like, no, we've got to like keep our pride and try and restore the palace. And so I really, really love that about the game. Now, one thing that we do want to talk about in this game is kind of the way that we moved through playing this game. We have played this game maybe 20 times at this point. Yeah. The first 10 games were about each of us learning how to perfect the side that we were playing. So obviously getting more familiarity with the deck, how quickly you want to move through it so that you can discard cards and find the more powerful cards. And that was my favorite time with this game. I think the exploration, the realizing that I took my eye off something and now you've won. Yeah. And that kind of push and pull of our experience level increasing.
Yeah, getting to know the decks and getting to know how do these 2 play differently. Yeah. That was great.
Yeah. And then from I think it was around from 10 to 15, Maggie and I both became experts at playing both sides, and then we started to notice that actually it felt like the US was winning more often than France, no matter which side we were playing.
Pretty much all the time.
All the time. And actually we were only winning as France if something lucky happened. We just happened to turn the right tile or have the right cards come up. And so we actually contacted the publisher and talked to them about it, because the designers had mentioned to us that France was harder to play, but then we mentioned that we were finding this, and they said that the odds are slightly stacked in favor of the US, because in real life, of course, the US won the event. And that made sense to us thematically, but as we kept playing, it did become a bit of a source of frustration that as you don't even have to play completely optimally as the US to take the win, but as France, you need to play optimally and almost have a little bit of good luck as well with the tiles that are turning over or the cards that you're drawing in order to have the perfect game to win. And so when we say this game is almost perfect, it's that from games 15 to 20, we started to feel a little bit of frustration around that point. And you could definitely house rule this game. I think if the French deck was thinned out a little bit of outfits, of course, the more powerful cards would be easier to find. Or if they're, if the designer had put, one more card that was powerful for France in, I feel like it would balance it out a bit more. So that was one little thing that was a little bit frustrating. You are always probably against an experienced US player.
Yeah,
you're almost always going to lose as France.
If someone's playing as the US and they know what they're doing, it doesn't matter how good you are at playing the France side. It's you're pretty much relying on luck if you're evenly matched to bring the game, like to actually
you need
win.
Everything to happen perfectly in sequence. And so for that reason, it did take away from the game a little bit, but overall, this game is so fantastic. And if it wasn't for that, if they were actually perfectly balanced and you had equal odds, this 100% would almost be the most played two-player game in our collection.
Now, I will say something though to that. Even though this is an interesting kind of comparison. Even though when we got to this now going from 15 through to 20. When you're okay, so now the challenge becomes, how do you win as France? When you're playing against someone who knows how to just even half play US well, because they will win, even if that's the balance. And what I found was I actually ended up, even though I was consistently losing as France, the game, it was actually more fun because it's a bigger kind of puzzle of going, okay, no, and you have more actions. So that's the other thing. That then the US side is kind of, sometimes you're kind of more sitting back and waiting for France to take all these other turns and you feel a little bit kind of powerless. But even so you're kind of winning more, but getting to play less. Whereas as France, you're losing more, but you're going, okay, no, it stays in my mind. I'm like, okay, no, maybe I haven't tried this thing, or maybe I'll go back for this thing. So I thought that was worth sort of mentioning.
Yeah, of course the journey of that is fun, but if you're someone who just cares about the win in a PvP battle game, no, the PvP battle game, it is about the win ultimately. I found that deflating over 10 games as playing as France, and so I think it's just something that I wish was more balanced in the game, and it's going to be a bit reflected in my score. I absolutely adore this game, and I think that's what makes me so frustrated about that tiny little point is that had it been even going in, I feel like you and I would be playing both sides still and just having this really tense, perfectly aligned battle. Like something like Radlands where you both come into it as equal players. I get it thematically.
Yeah, and that's why I think I don't mind it as much. I agree that it's I think it's even more of a frustrating thing if you're an abstract player, because it's you want that PvP to feel more like chess. You to feel more like, well, we should have equal chance.
I played the better game. And
Whereas this is more again, from a thematic point, I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's fine. And it's almost like I go in and going, I know that this is going to be the harder challenge. I know that I'm probably going to lose, but it's I find myself having fun trying and even going, nope, it still didn't. Nope, but and sometimes you do get lucky. You go, ha 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 ha, I saw the light. So yeah.
So overall, my rating for this game is an 8.5, and I've got this level of frustration for all the reasons that I just mentioned. If it was perfectly balanced, honestly, this would be closer to a 9 in my estimation, but I have to bring it down just for the sheer frustration of when I'm playing as it's more when I'm playing as the US as well. I feel almost like, I wish it was a bit more challenging to beat France. And so
it's too easy to win over Maggie
if you're playing well. So it's 8.5 for me.
Okay, for me it's a lot higher because I don't actually I didn't mind that
a lot higher.
Well, somewhat higher. I'm gonna give it an 8.8 for me. Yeah, so actually that's not that much higher. Just a little bit higher than you, because I am so enamored by this theme and the treatment of this theme and this setting.
Yeah.
And just every time I play it, I'm like, this is just so satisfying.
That's it, right? I didn't know about the Battle of Versailles until this game, and I've learned so much about it, and I'm interested. And now I want to go and watch all these documentaries about it. It's just, and it's amazing that a game can act as a gateway to all of that information in a different industry that I know nothing about. Also, I will just point out that you know, at 8.5 for me, it is starting to get close to games like Paris City of Lights and also just above that, Seven Wonders Duel. So for me, it is actually quite a high rating for a 2-player only game. And I know for you, Radlands was sitting at 9.
Yes.
So it's just below that.
Which, and again, I'll say, like, I am not at all a fan of PvP type games because I don't like that direct confrontation. And this, well, Radlands obviously had been the exception to that rule.
Yeah.
This is another one that managed to snuck in because of the nature of how it's running. Yeah.
And Radlands is an 8 for me, so this sits above it. So we hope you enjoyed this review and it was useful. If it was, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.